Hi, and welcome to an unusual one, really, because it's we're going to be doing the anniversary of Brexit, something that's close to my heart, and something I just wanted to really talk about and for people really to understand the journey. When I was involved, I mean, my experience in Brexit has been to the maximum limit, probably. 2000, very early part of when Brexit was starting, I was introduced to the Institute of Exports. Leslie Batcher at the time was leading the institute, and she'd asked me to come in through an illness of one of the key trainers to take over the reins of delivering Brexit. He hadn't done Brexit, and with Kevin Shakespeare at the time, I remember, being brought in to deliver Brexit in the UK and possibly in Ireland, and that was a huge challenge because nobody really knew what to expect, and putting together a program which I had delivered, and people who are watching this probably remember some of them very early stages of the Brexit training, and I delivered mainly all the Brexit and rules of origin. So really had to be really, clued up. Coming from a logistics background, I could kind of put all the pieces of the jigsaw together. And really, I thought at the time could really get people to understand. And what I see now, 2026, 10 years on, is what's changed. Not a lot, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. We're still having the same challenges, the same confusion. Being based in Ireland, I went to Ireland and delivered on the cross-border challenges there with a company, an Irish company, and also with Trade Ireland. And I worked extensively in Northern Ireland and in Belfast with a good friend, and Dublin with a good friend of mine, Tom McGrath, who was at the time retired, but he was head of the large case divisions of the Irish Customs. So got a really good knowledge. He taught me a lot, Tom. I knew a lot, but I think he taught me a lot, and I was thanking for that. Brexit were the challenges. We saw the challenges. We talked about the challenges of paperwork, customs, and all them key areas. And nothing really now has changed from that time. So 10 years in, politics have played a real massive role in that. We've overcomplicated Brexit to the full. I don't care what anybody says. We've overcomplicated this as a country. We've totally misunderstood what needed to happen and what we needed to do, and we let ourselves down because we didn't invest in the training to businesses. We had a very quick period of a bit of funding there. And as you see now, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon who are now the Brexit and customs experts, as we see, or AI experts. But I've been through that journey. Even to the journey in 2017, we was filmed by the news channel, the full workshop. So that was a challenge in itself. You can imagine, my mum always said could talk a glass eye to sleep, but when you've got cameras over your head for an hour and, well, nearly 2.5 hours, it's a real challenge. And then seeing it on the TV and it probably a 5 minutes from that 2.5 hours to a 5 minute video. So it was quite interesting to see. What the key things we were teaching at the time, or what I was very keen on, was the relationships with the freight forwarder, the customs, and the supplier, the exporter, the importer, or the warehouse. And they were the big fundamental challenges, and we still see that today. We still see that not really understanding of the paperwork, and it's just the sheer volume. One of the things that we learned when we left the EU, rightly or wrongly, we left, and as far as I'm concerned, it was aborts and we left, and I see all this thing about, well, we should have when we left, and it's simple as that. It's not changed. And I remember a good friend of mine in Ireland told me that I always remember he said to me, Richard, Brexit will go on for 15 years, and this was probably about 8 years ago. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah. And to be honest, it's still there. It's still going on. We still have the challenges. Freight forwarders have got better. They're moving, especially if they're going into Europe. Remember, a freight forwarder going into Europe, I was sending 30 trailers a week out into Spain, Italy, and Portugal and Germany, but no paperwork. It was all very easily. To imagine now to stop that and have to do paperwork and customs and everything associated with that would have driven me with absolute dread at the time. So what have we learned from that 10-year anniversary? What have I learned? Um, Certainly seeing AI playing a fundamental role, getting involved in AI in 2019 with Clay now over in Santa Clara, and understanding the basis of what they were trying to achieve to make AI work within the supply chain. Great company, still associated, not too much, but still associated with Clay now, and really still seeing what they're doing, still involved from a UK side, but not day to day or anything. Just like to see the progression, and they've really put some challenges in, and it'd be interesting to see how they evolve in the next few years. Being on the news channel, constantly on the news channel, radio stations talking about Brexit, delivering courses on Brexit, even fortunate 2019 to deliver over at the World Trade Organization to the council there for a 4-day event, which I delivered 4 days or 3 days of training with the council and lots of talks around Brexit and around them key areas. Working in Lithuania, working Spain, Germany, Italy, all around all around Europe, also Saudi Arabia, Qatar, China, just recently in South America through a business online. So, you gain that knowledge, and each country has its own challenges. Brexit was just one of them challenges. Where do I see the future of Brexit? I don't know. That's for politics. I never get involved in politics because it frustrates me every time I listen to them or listen to some people talking on LinkedIn and other channels about politics. At the end of the day, it's what it is. It's what's voted. You have to make the best of it, because what we did with Brexit is that we stumbled. We stumbled because we taught ourselves that we would eventually come out. But that was never going to happen. Well, it certainly hasn't happened in 10 years. Well, it'll happen in the next 5 years. I can't comment on that because I'm not with politicians. But we certainly have made it a lot harder than it can be. What is so difficult about creating a documentation and a customs? Yes, there's a cost there, but there was lots and lots of things that companies could have used. They could have used regime 42, allowed you to move goods. A lot of people, Europa were one of the first ones to get. Europa were one of the first people to jump on that. They did I think with Deloitte, and then a lot of the freight forwarders offered that. So, I hear this about challenges, but at the end of the day, there's lots of incentives for companies to use. Carriers have challenged. It's been a challenge for carrier, and I understand why. A lot of people get frustrated when they're working with carriers, particularly with customs and documentation. But it's a huge challenge for them. They're moving huge amounts of cargo. And when you're in from a logistics and a freight forward and running your own vehicles, you do understand the challenges behind that. Have we aligned with the EU? We're miles away. We've give lots of incentives to the EU to make it easier for goods to enter the UK, because we're a much larger importer. And we've made it damn hard for our exports going out on some particular industries in the food industry and others where health certificates and all these extra things have come into place, have caused challenges. But let me say, in my last 2 years and visiting companies, helping companies, supporting companies, I'm seeing very buoyant market. Don't let anybody kid you when they say that it's quiet. Lots of companies are finding opportunities, not just in Europe, but also further afield. And, if the UK government see these opportunities, better support, I think, is needed there. Better support with people who actually know what they're doing, as in from people like training, from customs, from sales strategies and all these key areas, understanding AI, how AI makes an important role within. So that's where we see the shift now. We see the shift in new markets, better customs controls, better understanding, better training. And that's where I see the future. But from somebody who was started from the day and supported the institute, obviously, I didn't. We were consultants. We weren't working for the institute. We were consultants at the time, and they had a big shift a few years down the line, and obviously they didn't need consultants anymore. But I'm proud to say that I delivered the Brexit for the first part. That's the toughest part. The challenges we had going to Ireland, working with farmers and other things, and you can imagine the challenges we had trying to explain to them that some of that was always delivered down the road at the pub could not now be delivered because it needed a URI number, it needed customs and all these things around it. So when you look back, it's quite amusing, but at the time it was a very challenging time for the businesses because it was a big worry for them. And it was never made smooth, and nobody could really give them the clear answers. And we didn't want to frighten people, but we knew what was going to happen, and it worked. If I look at my training programs at Brexit, they're no different to what they are now. So nothing really changed, and we're still trying to get ahead of that. So yeah, I just thought I'd give you an update. What are my things? What do I see in the next 5 to 10 years? I don't know. I think you've got to forget what's happened. You've just got to get on with it. Companies that evolve and change and get on with it and look at the profit margins, because trust me, you waste more money on the silly things you do than actually doing the paperwork and everything else. If you get that right, well, customs compliance, you will be very competitive in most markets. There's a big need for UK products, and there's a great opportunity there. And there's also a great opportunity to buy products from around the world. So I don't see that changing, but we have to make it easy. The one thing I would say is training. More, I would say, more experienced people in the market need to be out there. There's not enough experienced people, I don't think, who are giving the right advice or supporting businesses, and that's where I see the challenge. But yeah, I just thought from a humour point of view, it was a good fun time. It was a great time traveling, doing lots and lots of traveling. Now I sit in my house in the dining room delivering my courses and speaking to customers most times and having the challenges there. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster. It's not been helped by governments and challenges that they've just not really understanding what was required. And I think that put a lot of challenges on businesses in the UK, what was really not needed. I mean, I still, to this day and age, never understand why we encourage businesses to move production and other things into Europe when all the government had to do was fund it for a period of time, help businesses get out of that initial 2-year period where they weren't too sure what they were doing. And while it settled down, that would have been a lot cheaper than losing lots and lots of businesses to Europe and other places. And yes, people still have strategic warehouses, but not to the extent that people were moving because it was the unknown. I think a bit more clarity would allow business to make better decisions, and maybe would have kept more businesses in the UK manufacturing side, and we would have kind of got around it to make it work. Because ultimately, if somebody wants your product, they'll want your product. You just got to make sure you understand how to move it. And there's lots of systems that you can use to help you with that, customs warehousing, all these kind of IP, all these things to keep your costs down. So again, that's been the learning curve, is what's happened in the last 10 years is we learned better, but we're still miles away from learning what happened in them early parts of Brexit, the challenges around that. We've not really evolved. We talk about digital, we talk about customs. Has it evolved? I don't think it has much, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think there are a lot of companies trying to achieve and do things, but I don't think I would say there was any company that you would say, yes, they've done it fantastically. But ultimately, don't be put off. It's some great challenges that are ahead. And again, always be positive. You have to have a smile on your face. It's important. But yeah, I didn't want to do the training challenge. So let's say I just wanted to do a talk on my experience of Brexit, because I was in it full. I was deep, very deep in Brexit, and I was crawling out of it and keeping people informed and doing course after course after course, and it was a huge challenge at the time. But we got through it. I've learned a lot from it. Again, I don't think things have changed much, but hopefully things will change as we bring in AI, more data, more understanding. I think things will evolve and work out a lot better for businesses. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our Friday podcast.